Unfortunately, these villages are dispersed across kilometers of land, so complete coverage is impossible.
Over the years, Tunisia has made progress in its fight against terrorism. There has been no large-scale attack for 3 years now. But in the mountains, the threat remains. On March 19th, Tunisia's National Guard killed 3 terrorists in the region.
In Mauritania, women's rights activists are fighting an uphill battle for tougher penalties for sexual violence and discrimination. It's a conservative nation, and the topic is divisive. One draft piece of legislation aimed at punishing violence against women more severely has already been rejected twice by Parliament.
Zara has lived through a mother's worst nightmare. Months after the attack on her 5-year-old daughter, emotions are still raw.
He took my daughter whilst I was asleep. He took her away and he raped her. She had to have an operation.
The rapist, a serial paedophile, was sentenced to 10 years in jail. But according to the Association of Women Heads of Family, sexual offenders in Mauritania are often released well before the end of their sentences. There are calls for more extensive legislation with regards to women's rights, and in 2016, new legislation was drafted seeking much harsher penalties for sexual violence.
We need this law because we know that violence against women is skyrocketing.
But in this religiously conservative country, the bill proved to be too controversial. It was rejected by Parliament twice, and has now been withdrawn by the government.
We cannot adopt a law which contradicts Sharia law, which is the basis of the nation's constitution.
Opponents of the bill also criticise its wording. They say that the notion of gender in the title would pave the way for a possible defence of homosexuality, which is illegal in Mauritania. But among those that rejected the draft legislation, some are willing to seek a compromise to achieve better protection of women's rights.
Women clearly need this protection. No matter how tolerant our society is with regard to women, they're still considered as lesser in many regards, in mindsets and in many practices.
It's an opinion that's echoed by the NGO Human Rights Watch. In their report published in September, they said that even the draft legislation would not go far enough in tackling these issues.
Kenya is the 4th largest tea exporter in the world and number 1 in Africa. Its position is being further secured as a side effect of ongoing tensions between India and Pakistan. The long brewing struggle between the neighbours has seen Pakistan scaling back on tea imports from India, and so it's turned to Kenya, which is happy to bag the business.
Tea pickers are busy in these fields that just a few months ago nearly halted production after the price per kilogram of tea fell below €2. The drop of over 50 cents in 1 year meant warehouses full of tea couldn't sell their stock on the international market.
It worries me as being employed, because when there's no enough tea, I can either end up losing my job. Tea is the main cash crop in this region, so if there's no tea, actually there's no work.
After a rough start to the year, Kenya's tea industry seems to have found a solution in Pakistan. In 2018, the country imported 40% of Kenyan tea output, but now has even greater needs. Thanks to a renewed conflict, Pakistan can no longer buy Indian tea, a boon for producers here who can't rely on the local market.
Assuming like last year, I did about 18 million kilograms of tea. And what is taken by the Kenyans in this area maybe is 500 kilograms. Where do I take the other teas? I have to look for market.
In January, Kenya sold 30 million euros of tea to Islamabad. And with the Indo-Pakistani crisis ongoing, these numbers will likely increase. Industry experts say the impact could be hugely positive.
We're looking at a 10 to 15% increase in the price over time. Given there's an election in India and Narendra Modi wants to look tough, I don't see the tension subsiding yet, which means that the price of tea for Kenyan tea should remain strong.
Indicators suggest 2019 production will be lower than in 2018, but an increase in price could offset the output slowdown. Last year, Kenya exported over €1 billion worth of tea.
Polo has been played in Nigeria for over 100 years now, but it very definitely is not a sport for the masses. Nearly all the teams are owned by multimillionaires, and the scene caters to the same. The Lagos International Polo Tournament attracts a glitzy set that turns out as much for the fashion as for the sport.
It's West Africa's biggest polo tournament. Teams from 3 different continents came to Lagos. It's also an opportunity for Nigeria's richest families to socialize and sip cocktails.
Polo has shifted from just the sport to a fashion statement, and in the UK it's the same. And for me, it's something fun, it's something playful, something whimsical, something comfortable essentially, and that's why I enjoy it. That's why I chose to dress like this, a bit of color, a bit of pop.
Polo has been played in Nigeria for over 100 years. Nearly all the teams here are owned by local billionaires.
Well, it's an expensive sport because, your horses are like babies, maintenance is not easy. Today they can be well, tomorrow they can have, malaria, a fever, colic, or even get injured on the field.
Most Nigerians will never play polo. The country has the world's highest number of people living in extreme poverty. Nearly 90 million people, that's half the population,